GM fam, it's Daito here, and for Season 2 of Diablo 4, we are kicking things off with the Firewall Sorcerer. So, I wanted to show you this video, and as you can see, we are burning through this nightmare dungeon at 5 levels above our current level. So the monsters here are level 62, 63-ish, and we're level 57. This was the highest sigil that I had available, but as you can see, we have no problem going through this dungeon. Initially, I started off with a Hydra build, but I didn't like the setup that was required with the Hydras. To kick things off, especially if you're using the Serpentine aspect, you had to cast 2 of those things, and then, if you were using the vampiric ability that, allows your conjured units to give you a chance to spawn the vampiric curse, that took a little time. And so I decided to scrap the Hydra and go straight to the Firewall and use the vampiric ability that just straight up gives all of your damage over time effects a chance to spawn vampiric curse. And this season is all about the vampiric curse. Whatever class you're playing, you just need to figure out how you can cast vampiric curse and spread it across all of the enemies and keep it up, because there's other abilities that turn that vampiric curse into really cool things like vulnerability. So, vampiric curse is the name of the game, and let's go through the aspects that we're using in our gear. And if you want to, you can just jump down to the link in the description and check out what's what. But starting with the helm, we're using the aspect of Singed Extremities. So we're using an ability in our skill tree that gives us a chance to immobilize enemies with each of our, dots. And then now, after that immobilize wears off, the enemies are also slowed. So we're adding to our crowd control arsenal, which is really cool, especially when we're using aspects like Umbral, which gives us resources every time that we apply a crowd control effect. So we're getting 2 birds with 1 stone here. As soon as that skill procs immobilize and then switches to slow on all of these enemies, we're getting more resources, which is why we're using this aspect in our helm. In our chest, we're using Everling for some additional sustain, so it's giving us extra, damage reduction from crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies, and this really synergizes, with the aspect that we just went over with. So when it comes to our gloves, we're using the Stormwell gloves, or the Stormwell aspect, and this gives us a 20, up to a 30% multiplicative damage to vulnerable enemies while we have a barrier. And since we're using ice armor, we have barrier all the time. For our pants, nothing surprising here. We're using the disobedience aspect for that extra armor. For our boots, in order to move around the dungeon really quickly, we've got the Flame Walkers aspect, and so we're constantly just running through our flames and getting that movement speed boost. The amulet is very important because, remember, every aspect you put in your amulet gets like a 1.5% multiplier, so we're using Engulfing Flames to boost all of our burning damage when enemies are below 50%. So as soon as, a boss or an elite or anything like that drops below 50%, they're basically melting. For our ring, I mentioned already, we're using Umbral. It procs all the time. You can see in our video, we have no problem with resource sustainability. For our other ring, we're using the Conceited aspect, which again gives us more damage while we have a barrier active, and we pretty much have a barrier active all the time. For our weapon, we're using a wand, and then we're also putting in the Edge Masters aspect, which gives us more damage based off of our primary resource. And because we're managing our resources so well with Umbral and all of our crowd control effects, this is really, doing amazing things for our damage. For our offhand, we're actually using the aspect of control, and again, another multiplicative damage to crowd-controlled enemies when they're immobilized or frozen, from our frost abilities. And then the last thing that I'll say is, yeah, it's really that crippling flames skill on our tree that immobilizes enemies. That's kind of bringing all of this together. And I really don't know what I would change when it comes to the end game and the other bosses. Obviously, I'm not familiar with the new mechanics for all of the new Uber bosses, but hopefully, we can just essentially just almost stand still and burn everything that's in sight. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know in the comments what you think about the aspects and whatnot. We haven't optimized our paragon board yet. We're only level 52 or 53 or something, so we'll get to that eventually. We might make some tweaks here and there for the nightmare tier 100 dungeons and the uber bosses, but for the most part I see myself riding this build all the way up to level 100. And as you can see in the video, the play style is really fun. We're essentially just, we're Trogdor, right? We are burninating the countryside, and we are just running through the dungeon and, dropping flame walls and seeing things burn to a crisp behind us. So, yeah, we'll catch you next time, and happy hunting, fam.